Hello and welcome to the Avalanche quarterly webinar with Token Relations. I am Jacqueline Melinek, and joining me today is the Ava Labs Director of Ecosystem Relations, Brian Lieberman. Brian, how are you?
Doing great, Jacqueline. Great to be here. Hi, everyone.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you today. There's a lot to cover, but I want to start with some background and context. Avalanche, which is the primary network of the blockchain, currently has about 349 Avalanche L1s within its ecosystem and has seen a surge in user activity as well, which we will discuss. And in the past quarter, Avalanche L1s recorded all-time highs of 23.96 million and 49.26 million in daily active addresses and daily transactions. The network has also seen a number of integrations with entities like Grove Finance and Skybridge, which we will discuss in a minute. But to start at a high level, referencing back to those user activity milestones, what do you think is kind of driving that growth today?
Yeah, Jacqueline, great introduction, and really excited to be here to talk about all this great stuff. I think Avalanche has done a lot of work that's finally getting picked up, and we're seeing it in the kind of activity on the network. I think it's really a kind of coming together of a few different flywheels. So one being kind of purpose-built L1s that are coming together that are being supported by Ava Cloud, where we've done a really good job, in my opinion, of lowering kind of time to mainnet from quarters to weeks. So working with Ava Cloud, people are able to spin up L1s pretty quickly. On the stablecoins and kind of DeFi side, there's a lot of new assets and incentive programs that are being put forth to concentrate liquidity across Avalanche. So in terms of I know you're going to touch on it later, but kind of the stablecoin growth and things that we've seen, a lot of that is being powered by some of these programs. And it's really interesting. So when you look at Black Hole, Faro, Dexalot, and LFJ, there's a lot of activity happening on those platforms. And then we also have, like you mentioned, these enterprise on-ramps which are starting to pick up. So integrations like Grove Finance being the largest sub-DAO in the Sky ecosystem. They're deploying around $250 million into Janus Henderson's tokenized funds on Avalanche, which is super exciting, excuse me. And we're seeing things like Skybridge, bring in tokenized hedge funds as well. Thanks to Anthony Scaramucci and his funds, right? So people are coming to Avalanche to kind of bring forward these net new products in the ecosystem, and it's really exciting. So kind of what I think is important to take away here is that we're combining kind of app-specific L1s, real liquidity, enterprise rails, and so people are coming to the chain. And I think that this isn't just necessarily like a spike; it's more of product market fit in these different verticals, which are now starting to take off, and you see these flywheels accelerating.
Yeah, there's a chart I want to pull up actually on the Avalanche TVL front. It's grown 37% on the quarter to over 2 billion, and it's essentially at a level it hasn't reached since 2022. In July, Avalanche also processed nearly 20 million transactions in a single day. So, with those things in mind too, how do you kind of see these milestones shaping both adoption and developer momentum across the ecosystem and kind of bringing in either existing entrants, new entrants? Obviously, we're going to touch on the major partnerships too, but like this is
Definitely.
a great sign.
Yeah, it is. We're close to back to all-time highs of TVL and activity, and I think generally the market in general is picking up, not only on Avalanche, but here specifically we're seeing kind of activity kind of re-reach levels that we were excited about a couple of years ago. And so I think ultimately what this is showing in terms of developer adoption and adoption across the network is really saying, hey, you come to Avalanche, and as a developer, you are getting predictable fees, sub-second finality. You get credibility. You know that your app won't outgrow the platform, right? There's no kind of risk if you're going to spin up your own L1. You have solid unit economics, so you have low stable fees. There's a lot of new kind of business models that get unlocked there through micropayments, high frequency trading, different kind of ideas there, and then frankly tooling confidence, right? Like we have the infrastructure that we've owned and operated and built out, so that we can support our partners in developing and shipping faster over time, not slower, which I think is
Mhm.
really, really interesting. So I think, from a development perspective and a transactions perspective, 20 million transactions, I think kind of tells people, hey, come and ship, the most ambitious and exciting thing that you think you can build on top of our infrastructure. You're not going to hit a ceiling. This is just a point in a marker in time, but I think it gives you a really good example of, the potential of what's to come.
Yeah, I mean, the activity in tech is there, and it's
There you
literally
go.
shown in the
Exactly.
numbers. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You also mentioned before the Skybridge. announcement where Skybridge is tokenizing $300 million of assets. And I was at the Wyoming Blockchain Symposium when Anthony Scaramucci announced that. There's also then the Denari platform that's launching 24/7 global equity trading. I want to talk about both of those things, Brian, and how do you kind of see those two launches and use cases enticing, growth on Avalanche and then strengthening, the broader DeFi ecosystem as a whole?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, these two announcements are really exciting, and it's been in the works for quite some time. And when you think back to like some of the original use case ideas for digital assets, generally, tokenization has been at the forefront of those. And I think Avalanche has positioned itself as kind of the key institutional partner to bring a lot of these assets to market. With Denari specifically, it's building an L1 for tokenized equities, which is going to be really cool. I think that's going to be available shortly through Gemini in the US, which is really exciting. And all of this is kind of expanding on-chain capital markets, right? So for builders, it's kind of saying, hey, we see that there's a demand for this kind of like compliance-based tooling, KYC liquidity pools, custody, pricing, Oracle services, all these like asset management primitives that you need. We're going to have that, and you can build using those tools on chain. And then for more of the DeFi native folks, we talk about tokenized assets, being then used for different types of collateral and lending, structured products, fixed income strategies. And so a lot of this is bringing kind of the TradFi yields to users on chain, which is really, really cool, right? And there's a lot of, different kind of opportunities that open up because of that. So, when we settle real assets kind of 24/7 on Avalanche, developers and builders get new primitives, and DeFi gets new collateral, and everyone's able to kind of build more on top of these flywheels. So it's really an exciting time. And I think most importantly, right now, I think it also signals to kind of the real world asset and institutional folks that we're not just a playground for speculation. This is where real builders are coming to solve real world problems and scaling them for mass adoption.
Mhm. On the opportunity front, I want to get your take on when it comes to real world assets, RWAs, as we like to call them. What specific DeFi applications or enterprise use cases do you kind of see taking off most on Avalanche's platform today and then let's say down the line?
Yeah, so I think, payments and treasury and private credit, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of stablecoins being used to kind of like upgrade and grow the space. And this is where like traditional and private credit in the finance landscape, they're really leaning into because it's a whole new market. On-chain funds and treasuries, so tokenized money market funds, I think, there's a lot of versions of that, and that acts as kind of like a base yield for DeFi. So I think that's really kind of the forefront of like what's happening now and today. Very shortly, and things that we're seeing kind of come to market, a lot of companies are looking to do factoring and trade finance with digitally signed versions of contracts on chain. And what does that mean for actual true business use cases? You mentioned kind of Denari, kind of the brokerage
Mhm.
style access, so the equity ETF access tokens, being kind of compliant wrappers that are composable, which give a lot of other kind of flexibility to what you can do with those assets, which is really cool. And yeah, institutional cash management, again, corporate stablecoin rails for different types of payables, receivables, treasury operations. So I think
Mhm.
all of that is kind of like near term, midterm, frankly, and I think it's the pace of development and acceleration here is really exciting to watch. I mean, it's kind of I think we've opened up the window, and now every stablecoins is I would say more so flavor, like not just flavor of the month, but definitely something that like everybody and everyone is talking about. And we're speaking with many different whether it's large scale, small scale SMBs who are looking to integrate this in one way or another, right? And that's not just in the US, that's globally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, looking at the conversations that you've been having with enterprises, governments, I would love to know kind of like what is happening behind the scenes or what are these people really looking for that maybe they're not realizing, at a surface level that this is what they want, right?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to you know having conversations with people who every business is a little bit different in kind of what they need from a compliance perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and frankly from a region perspective, right? And so I think we're really fortunate in terms of the infrastructure and how Avalanche has kind of come to market, is that we are very customizable in terms of what we can actually bring to market, right? So whether you want something that's private permissionless, you want to choose your set of validators, you want to have your own token, not have a token, use the AVAX token, and especially in kind of these like compliance first and heavily regulated markets, people are searching for these types of solutions, and we've built something that can actually accommodate a lot of that. We're not trying to say, hey, here's our tech stack, you need to use this. It's more so, hey, let us listen to you and understand your needs, and then show how we can actually deliver on a solution that fits what you need to do, right? And so this is where across kind of enterprise, government, and regulatory bodies, we've been having pretty exciting conversations with a lot of folks. And I unfortunately can't name names yet. A lot of the stuff's not out
Sure,
yet, but
sure, right.
there's conversations where I walk out of the room and I'm like, wow, that was really cool, with like an entity
Mhm.
that like 5 years ago,
So they're getting it.
if you told me like, hey, these
Yeah.
guys are considering doing any of this, I would have walked out of the room and been like, hey, you're nuts. Like, this isn't even close to reality, right? So
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it is amazing, kind of just like the amount of enterprises and institutions that are interested and or entering the space today. Like you said, it wouldn't have even been kind of a thought five
yeah,
years ago. And now it's kind of like, oh, nice, they want to
there you go.
talk. Or, oh,
Exactly.
of course they want to talk, right?
Exactly.
I also wanted to get your take, zooming out a little bit on a regional perspective. How does engagement and adoption differ across regions? Ecosystem growth in the US, Europe, APAC. I'd imagine it's different, but there's probably some similarities across the board globally, right? But how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, Avalanche, we're fortunate enough to have, teams in different regions, and, we have local on the ground folks who are working with businesses, governments, institutions in each of the areas. I'd say that, in the US, a lot of the conversations are around kind of fintech integrations, institutional DeFi, stablecoin centric kind of opportunities. And, I think for a very good reason, Avalanche is based in New York and having a lot of those, very meaningful conversations kind of face to face.
Mhm.
Across, APAC, it's a lot around kind of the consumer apps, gaming, enterprise pilots. Japan especially is, pretty enterprise heavy.
Right.
Um, and, Korea, we have some of these really cool kind of fan engagement type models, for example, like Titan K-pop, which is really exciting, right? So, each area probably has different things that are leading in terms of, what's focused and top of mind. But at the end of the day, it's, very similar, in terms of like business practice of like, people need things that fit their business, not something that, is going to be, restrictive in one way or another, where they need a mold to, fit your solution, right? And so um, overall, I'd say that like we've been, very fortunate to have a lot of these really cool conversations, and it's led to some really exciting partnerships globally.
Yeah, you brought up Japan and then Asia more broadly, and I know Avalanche has made a number of developments in the region, from partnering with Toyota to Suntory to SMBC and JPYC launching a yen-backed
Yeah,
stablecoin on
exactly.
Avalanche. All these acronyms. It's
Yeah,
amazing, though.
it's a very acronym heavy, partnership announcement, when you start
Right.
going a bit more globally, right? Like,
Literally.
yeah.
But with those kind of partnerships and everything in mind, like, what role does Avalanche really want to play in these regulated enterprise heavy markets? Obviously, these are some really big hitters, sure, but beyond that, where do you kind of see, the true value?
Yeah, I mean, look, we want to be in every single conversation, right? I think, to our own little detriment, sometimes we are, because we are able to do a lot of different things. There's a narrative around Avalanche that like, oh, we are able to do so much, so like, what are you going to focus on, right?
Mm,
These use cases at the enterprise level, we're seeing a very clear demand signal there, and we think that there's a ton of value, in that, right? So if you're to point to certain things and say, hey, what would you rather bet on, right? Like, this is how I think about it. It's like, I'd rather bet on long-term institutional flows of global, trading, stablecoin flows, stock, whether it's equities, bonds, corporate treasuries, FX payments, versus something, and no discredit to it, but like a pump fund, right? Where it's like that is crazy revenue in a very short time frame, and then, will it last 5, 10, 15 years? We're not sure, but like, and it might, like, I'm not saying it won't, but I'd rather bet on, the institutional kind of volume, and activity there of these kind of much larger pools of like what I call like honeypot capital, right? And that's going to be around forever. And transacting and being a value layer that captures all of that, in my opinion, is something that's incredibly valuable, right? And
mm.
so, um, Yeah, I guess I'll kind of leave it at that.
For sure. And you're seeing a lot of demand on that front too?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's I think a lot of the major conversations that we're having that we're really excited about. I mean, across the
Mhm.
board, Avalanche is set up in a way where we have kind of verticalized teams who are working on, consumer applications, DeFi native applications, some of these enterprise applications, the institutional, some AI stuff. So there are, really cool, I think, companies kind of across the board, right? So like, for example, things in culture and sports, right? Like FIFA, for example, what we're doing with Uptop and, the Pistons and the Cavs, predictfully the agriculture markets on water. So because we are, set up in a flexible way, we're able to actually bring on and, kind of highlight a lot of markets that like traditionally for, some other businesses, they wouldn't actually be able to, build, frankly, which I'm really excited about, right? From an ex venture investor perspective, when I see companies who are generating meaningful amounts of revenue and all of a sudden start to say, hey, wait a minute, we can leverage technology, to go out and capture a new market that like previously we couldn't. That to me is
Mhm.
really exciting, right? Because and we're seeing a lot of
Yeah.
examples of that, right? And so that to me, on one hand is really cool. And the last point on this I'll say is, from a market capture perspective, I want to highlight Inversion, obviously, and what they're doing and what Santiago's doing. Going out and kind of acquiring the distribution is another way of looking at, some of these, market opportunities here, which, again, thanks to the way that the technology architecture, you're allowed to go and do, right?
Mhm.
Or it enables rather. So excuse the poor English, but
Yeah. Actually,
yeah.
I was gonna say I want to talk more about inversion capital and kind of what's going on there, for listeners who aren't familiar. Maybe just like a quick overview on that, but then also like what are is Santiago and his team really trying to do that is possible on Avalanche opposed to maybe somewhere else, or how did that even begin?
Yeah, so basically inversion, and I will not get into like the super weeds here, but at a very high
High
level,
level, yeah.
yeah, they are looking to, similar to like how a private equity company would go acquire a business. They are looking to do something similar, in a market where they can use, crypto and blockchain rails to change the kind of like average revenue, per user metric, given that, transacting on a lot of, crypto rails are much less expensive than traditional rails, and then also include a financial kind of layer on top of that where you're able to actually provide financial services, which are generally very high margin. And so they're looking to go acquire a business that would allow them to bring on, an existing user base, right? So try to acquire the distribution versus build it from 0 to 1. They're trying to go 1 to 10, right? And there's a lot of models out there. You kind of talk about like, and this is totally separate, but it's like, the silver tsunami. Everyone's trying to, raise a search fund and buy an existing business versus kind of build one. This is a version of that at a high level using the technology, to enable that. And meaningfully on Avalanche, what he's able to do is create a customized enterprise version of his own chain with, a lot of different variables baked into the kind of market environment, for wherever they end up acquiring a business, right? Like acquiring a business in Mexico probably looks very different than somewhere in Europe in terms of the regulations that you need to follow and how data is structured and where you can keep certain things. And Avalanche allows you to have that customizability for that business, right?
Yeah. I mean, every ecosystem definitely has its perks, but then there's also challenges, right? So how do you kind of manage the hurdles within Avalanche or driving mainstream adoption or working with these different L1s to really expand and grow with that in mind?
Yeah, it's a never ending kind of quest, and a lot of times I actually call it like, wizard soup, right? Like how do you actually grow this stuff? It's a combination of so many different things. Some of it's timing, some narrative, marketing, crypto Twitter, not crypto Twitter, right? Like there's all these different venues of, being able to, drive kind of attention, frankly, which, in a lot of degrees is one of the more important things that you can have, when building like a super crypto native product. For Avalanche, particularly, I think for us, again, the well, two things. What one is, I still think generally like UX UI of all, most crypto native stuff is pretty bad, right?
Mm.
We're working very deeply with, the core wallet, which is our own wallet, to have AI agents support actually, you typing in, hey, I want to buy X of this and a percentage of that, and it'll do it automatically, which I think is really cool and abstracting away a lot of the more confusing and or risky operations that one might do with by themselves on chain. And then the other is frankly like narrative clarity, right? So for us, coming back and showing the market of like, all right, well, this is what exactly we want to be known for, and this is what we're gonna kind of hang our hat on. And then again, unfortunately, or fortunately, like token price, which is kind of like your stock price, is what drives marketing a lot of the time, frankly speaking, right? And so
Mhm.
there's different waves of kind of catching, a lot of that. And we have a lot of announcements across the board in like TradFi, DeFi, enterprise, and government. So we're doing a lot of these different things, and I think that a lot of people kind of ask me like, "Hey, how does that affect price and the token itself?" And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And value accrual mechanisms, I think they're all there, but we also have a challenging data question around the different L1s that exist that are out there, and the C chain as well. There's only so many places that show kind of versions of that data, right? And so actually giving people a whole picture is sometimes difficult, frankly. So that's
Yeah.
definitely one of the challenges that we face as an ecosystem, and we're I think we have a very clear plan in place to kind of go attack that head on. But it is something that we are definitely focused on at the moment, for sure.
Mhm. On the front of builder support, and on this topic too, how is Ava Labs balancing ecosystem programs like Codebase, DeFi incentives, and tooling improvements such as like Ava Cloud to kind of make the developer journey smoother and more,
Yeah.
I guess, accessible? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we're really fortunate to be in a position where we can put resources towards all of these kind of key initiatives, right? And so what I'd say is we kind of run like almost like a laddered model, right, where we have kind of support across the different phases of the business, right? So Ava Cloud really good at removing day zero friction, right? You can spin up your L1, you get really great infrastructure observability upgrades kind of out the gate. You have a team working on that very, 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 kind of, I would say, expeditiously. Code base
Hmm.
and grants and, kind of investments from, the foundation. A lot of what we're doing now and today is we're excited to partner with folks who are building, long-term type businesses where we will be giving out, whether it's milestone-based, grants or investments, and working with them kind of to continuously, fuel the fire, so to speak. And then there's more targeted incentives kind of on the DeFi side, which are liquidity programs where we look to create flywheels with, key KPIs, and, meaningful kind of long-term traction. And then, on the developer experience side, it's, SDKs, templates, audit support, and go to market like once teams actually hit some sort of traction. So, in my view, it's kind of like we fund what's missing, incentivize what's working, and productize what's repeatable, right? And so we have the system to actually help you go from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100.
Hmm. How do you kind of see Avalanche's ecosystem evolving, in the short term versus the long term with those things in mind too? And then what are kind of the major growth areas you're most focused on right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, the end of 2025, probably Q1, Q2 of 26, I think it's still going to be, and narrative is still pushing around, scaling stablecoin and payment rails, deepening our RWA collateral and kind of like, DeFi, and then landing 2 to 3 kind of flagship big name L1s. Long term, we are focused on building out a network of specialized L1s, right? So that's across finance, commerce, gaming, all interoperating with shared liquidity and compliance layers. So that's really, really meaningful, right? It's like you have all these different dApps which are now interacting with each other. That to me is like a super, super cool end state. It's going to take a little while to get there. We already see on L1 beat, we have a bunch of kind of ICM messages going, and all that's great. What does that look like when we
Hmm.
5x it, 10x it, 100x it, right? And that's going to be kind of where we start to see our real power. I think if you look at the growth curve, we're like just starting to peak up, right? If you like zoom out on a 10-year frame. So that's something that I'm personally very excited to see. And yeah, in terms of our focus generally, or what I'm excited about, it's kind of a mix of it all. Frankly, it's like I get to wake up every day and work on all of it. So It's hard not to be
Yeah.
excited.
There we go. What about stablecoins? I know stablecoins grew to reach, I think, 2.2 or 2.33 billion. There we
Yeah.
go. With USDC leading the way, reaching 1.43 billion. What would you kind of attribute to that, and how does that play into the bigger picture of all these major themes?
Yeah, so I think, it's a consistent kind of mix of, opportunities across the space, right? And,
Hmm.
that's, I think, proof points to a certain degree of some of these liquidity incentive programs starting to work where we're having, you see those charts every other day where people are saying, oh, Avalanche has X amount of $1 million being bridged over, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have kind of a continuous flywheel where it's starting to pick up, right? Where you're seeing massive amounts of stablecoin issuance and other opportunities kind of coming to the forefront.
For sure. Also on, I guess, the rest of 2025, looking to the rest of the year, what should the community be most excited about? Are there any upcoming partnerships, product launches, ecosystem milestones that you could share or even allude to?
Uh, by name, maybe not, but I will say this: it's like there are some of the biggest names in the world that we're talking to, and very close to the end of the line. I can't give up any kind of more specific information, but um, you know, once things launch, you'll probably be able to quote me back, being like, "Oh wow, is this what he meant? Like, wow, he played that way too cool for what that was."
Right.
Um,
Right.
so I think even like as early of tomorrow, there might be some really exciting news in the DeFi space. So I will give you a hint, hint, wink, wink at that. And then
Okay.
over the course of the next little while, I would suspect and continue and look for continued growth in kind of DeFi TVL, new products in the DeFi market, new,
Mhm.
kind of DeFi 2.0 yield, so which is more infrastructure, institutional type and institutional grade yield, rather. And, on the consumer side as well, there's, some major organizations in, the media and entertainment space and sports space, which, I'll let people speculate on, but, it's names that the minute you hear it, people are going to be like, "Oh shit, wow, that is absolutely incredible." And yeah, it's stuff that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, for sure. And then I saw we got a comment from someone, and I want to ask you about it too. Is like
Sure.
on the product front of things, Solana has their Seeker phone. Sui has a gaming device. Is Avalabs thinking about products at all like that, or is that kind of just really
Yeah,
not in the
not
current?
not that I'm aware of. I think specifically on the gaming side, I mean, um, nothing that I know. That being said, you can download off the grid on Xbox and play it on your
That is true.
home kind of console, right? So, folks out there, if you have a gaming console, you don't necessarily need to go out and buy something new. You can just play on it with what you have, which I think is a really cool accomplishment. Um, but yeah, once if I know anything else, I'll be able to share. But as of now, I don't believe so.
Okay, it looks like you have an iPhone behind you, or something like
Uh,
that.
I have an iPhone. I have all
No,
sorts
the
of
the
stuff.
the backdrop.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Last thing, Brian. Aside from everything we've discussed, what are you personally most excited for Avalanche, the community in Q4, wrapping up the year, and then let's say 2026 coming around the corner?
Yeah, so I think, for me, the most exciting part of a lot of this is, having like, friends kind of text me and message me being like, "Oh, hey, I didn't know that this was on Avalanche," or like, "What the hell was this?" Like I clicked on these buttons and, heard it was on Avalanche. So it's like people are using products and services that are built on top of our protocol, that a lot of times, they don't even know that they're using something on chain, right? So I think, when that happens more globally speaking, right? When everybody starts to use versions of these products where they don't necessarily know that they're interacting on chain, I think that's when kind of we win, frankly.
Mhm.
And for me, the next kind of super exciting stuff. I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities right now in the private credit space as it relates to DeFi native yields, right? And so there's a lot of these institutional managers with tons and tons and tons of cash, who are now looking at businesses that use our blockchain rails in general, but a lot of it, what I'm seeing is specifically native to Avalanche. And they're saying, hey, wait a minute, like all of a sudden, with this new technology lever, they're able to generate, a certain yield that we're really excited about. How do we get involved, right? And
Hmm.
that's really exciting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would say over the next kind of 6 months, like that, those are the types of conversations that are meaningful chunks of capital that are coming in that are totally net new, that we're getting the opportunity to kind of inform folks about, like, hey, how this is how it works. These are the opportunities at hand.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to discuss always in the Avalanche ecosystem, so I'm sure there will be no shortage of topics for us to talk about next time. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today, and thank you to everyone for listening in.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. And yeah, really thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this